Welcome to Moving Mattresses in 3-inch heels, celebrating women and the many hats and shoes they wear. Here we will dive into the ups and downs of womanhood with humor, heart, and wisdom, empowering you every step of the way. I'm Julia Jordan, and I'm thrilled to partner with you on this journey. Now you may be asking yourself, what the heck does moving mattresses in 3-inch heels mean? Well, it's literal. I was literally moving a mattress in 3-inch heels, my favorite pair no less. And I came to the realization that not only can women do anything, we do everything. We're going to focus on 5 pillars: metabolism, meditation, mental health, menopause, and I would be remiss if I didn't add the 5th, medical. It occurred to me when I was putting these metrics together, all 5 of the words do something that most women do not, and that is start with M-E. Start with me. So I'm going to amend my previous statement. Women can do anything, and we do everything, except prioritize ourselves. But it's time to. It's time for us to start with me. If you're ready to laugh, learn, and leap into a healthier, happier you, hit that subscribe button and join our wellness family. Let's go on this journey together of self-consideration as we discover how to start with me. Welcome to Moving Mattresses in 3-inch heels. I am your host, Julia Jordan, and today's episode is Realigning Your Mind with Dr. Vanessa Calderon. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Vanessa Calderon is a first-generation Latina master coach and board-certified emergency medicine physician. She is also a Harvard grad and mother of 2. Dr. Calderon is the host of the podcast, The Empowered Brain, the only podcast that uses science, psychology, and coaching to help you rewire your brain and become more effective and have a happier life. Welcome.
Thank you, Julia.
I'm sure most of my listeners know who you are because they listen to your podcast. And I think what all of us have in common is we want to live our best version of ourselves. And I think you are one of the best at decluttering the mind. And you give such good and actionable advice. But I have to tell you, when you started talking about the cognitive thought model, I was like, you just explained so much of some of the unintended results I've had in my life. They were not the results I was pursuing. They were the total opposite of what I wanted, the opposite of what I deserved, but yet they were the results I was getting. And then when you started talking about cognitive thought model, I was thinking, if I re-engineer my results through that model, I have my answer. And you explain cognitive thought model, just so everyone knows what it is, very eloquently. It's our thoughts lead to our feelings, and our feelings lead to our actions, and our actions create the results in our lives. And I'm just like, okay, I get this. And so I'm starting to think that starting with my thought, who I thought I was, because it was who I was told to be by the conditioning of my upbringing and society, me accommodating that felt comfortable and it felt right, even though it wasn't. So I took action based on those misguided feelings and ended up with results that weren't right for me. And I know I can't possibly be the only one that has or is been dealing with that. So how do we untangle the thoughts of who we are, told that we are, versus who we actually are?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, if we were just going to take this a step back, the cognitive thought model is incredibly powerful, and it's also the basis of cognitive behavioral psychology. So, the one thing, though, that I want to get clear to everyone listening is it's simple and it works for, I'd say, the majority of our thoughts. Your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions, actions or whatever you do out there will create your results. However, if you are having a trauma response, so this is different. So I just want to make sure we name this for
Okay.
people listening.
Yeah.
The trauma response bypasses some of the cognitive thought model because in a trauma response, you're immediately going to your nervous system, which creates an emotion, and that you're bypassing the thought piece. And so it's like you see something, you have an emotion, and then you're going down the spiral. Your emotion is still driving your actions, still driving your results, but it bypasses that thought piece. And so still, however, getting to know your thoughts and having that awareness is still by far one of the most, I'd say, incredible skills because it's kind of like a superpower that will definitely help you start creating intentional results in your life. And sometimes when you have awareness around your trauma response, for example, then you can know, let me just give a super simple example. Let's say that you are a veteran of a war, you heard a loud boom, and you know that at the time was a bomb going off, so you took cover. Now, when you hear a loud boom, you might be just walking down the street in the middle of a busy city and a car backfires. You might still take cover, when that happens. And so it's
Right.
really important to know, and this is what a lot of really talented trauma informed therapists do and some trauma informed coaches is they can teach you what happens in those instances and help you rewire and treat your nervous system reaction. So I just want to name that because I think in the world of, I've been a master coach for a very, very long time and I'm a trauma informed coach and I'm also a physician scientist. And so in the world of self-help, I think people try to simplify the cognitive thought model, which I think is
Mhm.
beautiful and simple and I think it's great. But I also think if you're noticing that, hey, there's this one thing in between, like, I just don't know why I'm always so anxious every time this happens, there might be a trauma response associated there. And so it's important to see that, capture that, and notice that.
That's really interesting. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, absolutely. So your question about how do you create essentially intentional results and untangle, what you have been told to who you want to
Mhm.
be.
Right.
Man, I have to tell you, Julia, that is like the question of the century, right? This is what we all want to do. We all want to
Yes.
create intentional result. So the first thing I would say is let's pause for a second and let's look around and ask ourselves, do we have the results that we want in life? Do we have those results? Do we have, for example, the relationships we want? Do we have the career we want? Do we have the amount of money in our bank account that we want? Do we have the time that we want? That is the very first place to start. And if you're noticing yes, yes, no, maybe in some of those areas, that's a good place to start. Because what typically happens, and I'll say this is what happens to like 98.9 or 99.9% of the human population, not
Yeah.
just Americans, not just women, but most people are walking around this world living a life like modeled by what they think is their conscious brain, but your conscious brain is a tiny little piece of what actually drives you. If you were to think about it as kind of like this triangle, your conscious brain is
Mhm.
just a tiny, like little 5%. Underneath that is your subconscious brain. And then underneath that is your autonomic brain, which is where your habits live. And so most of what you're actually doing when you're like strolling around and you're making decisions is coming from not the conscious part of your brain, which is what we think. It's coming from the subconscious part of the brain and the autonomic brain. And I say that because starting by like, do I have the results I want? And then working backwards by saying, like, why don't I have the results I want? Why are like holidays for me? Let me just give you a tangible example. Why are the
Yeah.
holidays for me so stressful all the time? Like, why do I always feel so like, ugh, like I just can't enjoy the holidays? Why is that?
Yeah.
And then we start to ask. So, and this is for everyone listening, ask yourself, do you believe the holidays always have to be stressful? You might think the answer to that is yes, but I'm going to tell you right now that's not true, you know?
So they have to.
No, exactly. And so if you and what is it that you do around the holidays that make them stressful? Are you the person that's volunteering all the time to have everybody over? Are you the person that thinks that you have to be the perfect host? And this is a big one for women. I have one of my clients who just worked through this for her because she grew up with a mom that was always the host, always had to be
Mhm.
perfect, the food always had to be delicious. And you think about women, right? And our conditioning. What are we conditioned to do? We're conditioned to be the perfect host all the time.
Yeah.
And so if you're not, what happens? You have all these stories. I'm failing, I'm not good enough, all of these types of things.
Mhm.
Though and what we are actually trying to avoid when the stress shows up is we're trying to avoid those thoughts and feelings associated with inadequacy. insecurity, right? So what we're trying to do and why we overwork or why holidays might feel stressful is because we're pushing against old school beliefs. And it's so interesting because I think about, here's another example. This is something that happened to me when my daughter, I have two young kids and they're awesome and I love them so much. And when my
Oh,
daughter was really, really young,
yeah.
she's my oldest, we were celebrating her birthday and it was her first birthday. So here's my first birthday as a mom for my kid. And I remember leading up to the birthday, how stressed out I was. And I was like, I didn't have the awareness at the time, but I was like, man, everything had to be perfect. The piñata had to be there, the food, the guests, is it going to be warm enough? All those things. And I was so concerned. And I saw my husband on the flip side, he was chill. No, whatever, let's just get some whatever cookies and whatever. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And I was like, why is this so wildly different? And I realized it's like women were conditioned to host and we're conditioned for it to be perfect because
Yeah.
how do we get judged? We're judged by what people, and so we think that to be the perfect mom, the birthday parties have to be perfect. To be the perfect host or the perfect whatever spouse, when we host, it has to be perfect. And you might still even hear people say things like, oh yeah, she just loves to host, and think about like what was on if you are in a traditional sort of marriage, what did you put on your list for gifts, for your marriage gifts? Probably a bunch of stuff for hosting, because that's traditionally what we used to do, right? Like you had to have these beautiful
Yeah.
hosting dishes and all these types of things. And if you don't examine those things, you assume that that's just how it has to be. And it creates, so when you push against that, it feels unsafe when in the beginning, right? In the beginning, it feels really unsafe to push against it and say, is this true? Because you've been doing something the same way for so long that you've just created. This is how we create habits. When you do the same thing for a really long time, depending on what data you read, anywhere from 14 days to 21 days, it'll create these connection between your brain cells, your neurons, and it makes it happen so fast that now it's just happening automatically. Then it gets moved to the autonomic part of your brain, the subconscious part of your brain where your habits live. And that's just who you become. And then you never go back and question. And the reason why it's so uncomfortable for us is because you're literally rewiring that part of your brain. And your brain is here to do two things: keep you alive, do it as fast as possible, which means anything that's going to get in the way, make it uncomfortable, make it hard, we avoid doing. And that includes questioning what we know to be true, which is why bias exists, which is why once you make a decision about something, that's what you stick with. And it's really hard to push back on that.
Are you saying stress is pushback against tradition or what we've been programmed to believe? I mean,
Uh,
is that what you just said to me?
I said that. I did say that. And that is how sometimes stress shows up for us. And so you might call
Okay.
stress something else, anxiety, you might call it
Uh-huh.
overwhelm.
Yeah.
So if that is happening to you in a way where like I'll say, for example, another thing that happens to a lot of really smart women is you
Yes.
feel a lot of stress at the end of a work week. Let's say it's Friday, it's 5
Mhm.
p.m., and you're feeling so much stress. And if you were to stop and examine, like, why are you feeling overwhelmed? Why are you feeling anxious? The weekend's coming. It might be because you've decided you haven't done enough. I didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done. What now? I'm going to be unproductive. Now, what if I fail? So on and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is based on old habits, old ways of being, or what you think you need to do. So for me, growing up, I'm 5 foot tall, light skinned Latina, and I'm also a physician and I was a leader for a long time. And there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. Plus, I felt incredibly insecure, I felt like an
Yes.
imposter. And I thought that the solution was overworking. Gotta just work harder. Gotta just work harder, which led to stress, which led to
Mhm.
overwhelm. But what was I doing? I was trying to prove that I belong there, which is
Yeah.
kind of what you got to there. Like a lot of times when we are experiencing unnecessary stress, which the modern world is stressful, that's for sure. The stress response is created to keep you safe and alive. Like if a car is going to run into you when you're driving, your stress response goes off to help you
Mhm.
swerve. Fantastic. That's what we want. But what is happening now almost everywhere, is our stress response is going haywire. It's on overdrive. In fact, most of us, you don't even realize this, but let's say you wake up in the morning and you missed your alarm. So you are late. So your stress response goes off. Now you're getting up in the morning. Maybe you have kids, you got to get ready and they're taking forever. Stress response goes off again because you like yell at them. Now you're driving them to school. The carpooling is really long. Stress response goes off again. Now you're driving to work and there's a lot of traffic. Stress response goes off again. You get to work, you can't find parking, your stress response goes off. You're dealing with an annoying colleague, your stress response goes off again. You're driving home and you realize you didn't plan anything for dinner, your stress response goes off again. So every time your stress response goes off, it secretes hormones in your body. The number one most commonly known hormone is called cortisol. Secretes it in your body. It's traveling all over your body, telling your body, react to stress, react to stress, which is why so many of us we chronically are overstressed. And you might not realize you're chronically overstressed. You just think that this is life. This is
Hmm.
just the way life is supposed to be.
Right.
But then you start having these bad health outcomes. Why do I keep getting these weird rashes? Or why can't I sleep through the night? Or why is my hair so thin? Or why did my sex drive go down? All of these things are chronic reactions to stress.
Oh, okay. My cortisol's high. Is that all you need to know about me? Um, I had a hormone panel, and that's the one that we were like, whoa. And how do we, kind of a two-parter, but how do we rewire ourselves? Okay, recognize stress. What should our response be? How do we taper that back? We may not be able to control the situation, but we can control our response. So,
Mm.
how do we make ourselves aware and have a better response to what could be a stressor?
Yeah. This one thing I'm about to say might be life changing for a lot of people because actually doesn't have to be hard.
Okay.
All it requires is a quick pause. So the first thing you need to know though is like, what does my body do when I react to stress? So ask yourself right now if you're listening to this, like, what do I do when I get triggered or when I get upset or when I get frustrated or angry? What do I do? I, for example, clench my jaw or I ball up my fist.
Yeah.
So do you know what you do, Julia, when you get stressed?
Oh, I clench my teeth. I grind
Hmm.
my teeth. Yeah.
Yeah. So a good thing to ask yourself is it might not be like, what do I do when I get stressed? But a better
Hmm.
question is, what do I do when I get pissed off? What do I do when I get angry? What do I do when I get frustrated? Because the same thing is being turned on. Because what's happening when you're reacting to stress is that your mind, your body is perceiving a threat. Something is wrong. I perceive a threat. Your body
Yeah.
doesn't know the difference between an actual threat, we're being chased by a bear, or a perceived threat. Someone just triggers us at work. And so it's the
Yes.
same exact reaction happening. So when you can figure out what happens when I get angry, where do I feel it in my body? Oh, I just like for me, for example, I would clench my jaw and I'd ball up my fist
Hmm.
consistently every time I get pissed off. Um, but for other people, it might be like pressure in the chest. Their face might get really hot. They might feel their
Hmm.
heart beating really quickly. They might get cool and sweaty palms.
Yeah.
And all of these things, if you think about it, they're all the things that your body does to keep you safe and alive. Your palms get cool and sweaty in case you're going to overheat to keep you
Hmm.
alive, right? Your
Yeah.
heart rate starts going up to increase your blood flow to your body in case you need to run away. So all of these things are things that your body is doing to keep you alive. So first step, what is your body doing? Second step is notice, like, what are the things that trigger me?
Yeah.
Oh, every time I get that annoying email from that person, I get triggered every time. Every time I see that person walking down the hallway, oh, like, are they going to talk to me? It triggers me every time.
Mm.
Every time I get a call from my boss or a text from my boss, it triggers me. So the reason why it's important to know those things is because what's usually happening is there's some underlying value that you're afraid might not be being met. So for me, for example, there's three things that I used to think I needed, and these are trauma responses because of what I experienced growing up. But there are three things that I thought I needed to be successful. I thought I needed to be in control. I thought I needed to make sure that things were right, that I was right. And I
Yeah.
thought I needed to be respected or respect others. And so if you are a high achieving perfectionist, for example, you might relate to some of these controlling, perfectionism, those types of things. So for me, what used to trigger me all the time is when I'm speaking to somebody and then they start going off the handle about something that I just know not to be true. I've seen the studies, I've seen the data. What you're saying is bananas. That's bonkers. Like that's not, at least show me data, right? That's not true. So that used to trigger me. So when you start knowing the things that trigger you and you're aware of what happens to your body, and when
Uh-huh.
that happens to you, you can pause. Because what you actually want to be aware of is what my body does when I get triggered. Because your body is reacting so fast that your brain hasn't even had a chance to process what's been happening. So once you can know what my body does when I get triggered, then when it happens, so for me, every time I felt my nails in my palms or I felt my
Yeah.
jaw clench, that was my note. That was my for myself to be like, okay, pause And it's time to rewire myself to come back. So I'm going to teach one quick thing that's pretty simple, or two things I can teach that are pretty simple.
Yes.
One is a breathing exercise. So if you resonate with breathing, this might be a good one for you. A
Okay.
really simple thing you can do once you get triggered, once you pause and catch yourself, is there's two breathing exercises. One is a pretty popular one. Your listeners may have heard of it before. It's called 4x4 breathing. And it's a yoga technique where essentially you take a deep breath for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, also known as box breathing. So you can like picture a box in front of you. For the first side
Yeah.
of the box, breathe for 4, inhale, hold your breath for 4, exhale for 4, hold your breath for 4. The reason why that works is because once you start the inhale, once you start breathing, you've brought your mind back to the present moment. And when you do that, you turn off your fear center, your amygdala that is causing your stress response. Then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. And my recommendation is what I teach my students is that when you're holding your breath for this next 4 seconds, acknowledge what your body's doing. So you start the breathing when you notice you've been triggered. The
Hmm.
next 4 seconds, when you're holding your breath, what's your body doing? So for me, I'm like, oh, I clench my jaw again. And then you exhale for 4 seconds. So the exhalation piece is incredibly important because that's what turns on what's called our relaxation response. It turns off our stress response, our sympathetic nervous system, turns on our relaxation response, parasympathetic nervous system. It relaxes our body. That's why whenever you do any like inhale or any of those exercises, you're supposed to exhale slowly because the inhalation doesn't calm us down. In fact, the inhalation might cause our heart rate to go up a little bit. The exhalation relaxes us, turns on our vagus nerve, and so it helps us relax. And you can't have your relaxation response on at the same time as your stress response. Your parasympathetic nervous system is not on at the same time as your sympathetic nervous system. So once you breathe out slowly, it turns it off. So you breathe out nice and slow. And while
Hmm.
you're breathing out, you relax your body and return it to neutral. So I literally open my hands and I put it to the side of my body where I relax my jaw. And then you have 4 more seconds of just holding your breath. And during those 4 seconds, I just give myself a little like note of gratitude, like, good job. Good job for catching. Good job for not reacting. Good job for rewiring your brain.
That is so helpful. I think it brings such self-awareness. I mean, I'm someone that internalizes. I know some people explode. I do the opposite. I just keep it all inside. And yeah, I mean, I feel my jaw like right in here. And sometimes my eyes start to tear up. So I'm not crying, but my eyes tear. And so that's really interesting because you're making me think that through, which is so helpful. And then you can't be stressed and relaxed at the same time. I mean, obviously, but I never it's like, sticky notes of like, they're so obvious. Why didn't anybody think of those sooner? It's like, that's such an obvious thing, but it's not, I think, something that I really think about and maybe most people don't think about. Um, so that is really helpful. You said something about like, putting your hand on your heart, and you talk about that when you're celebrating your progress. And what does this do when you put your hand on your heart and you acknowledge
Mm.
yourself and what you've done?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think there's this sort of like trauma I think a lot of women experience around receiving. Like
Mm.
receiving feels so uncomfortable. Like we
Yes.
can't even receive a compliment, like that's pretty well known. Like
You're
someone says
right.
like, Julia, you're so beautiful. What a great smile. You're like,
Ex It's like we've known each other for years. Exactly.
and yeah, well, here's the thing. When you give yourself love, compassion, understanding,
Mhm,
words of acknowledgement, you slowly start to heal that wound of receiving.
mhm.
And I can go on for days about why we have those wounds of receiving, right? Women, what have we been socialized to do? To be caregivers.
Yes,
What gives us self-worth? Giving to others, helping
yes.
others. What is like the worst like thing you can ever call a woman? Selfish. So like
Yeah, I've had to work through that one.
girlfriend, me
Yes,
too. And the truth is I still work through it. It shows up for me at different levels.
yes.
And so here's what happens when you celebrate yourself. A few things happen. So if you're like a super like ambitious, smart, high achieving woman, what you do is you set a goal and then you work your butt off to get there. And then when
Yep,
you're there, you stay for about 30 seconds, you set your next goal, and then your next goal,
yes.
and then your next goal. And what we end up telling ourselves is that none of these goals are good enough. That wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. The problem with that is it causes burnout, it causes stress, and it's a lie. It's a total lie. Who's told us that reaching that goal wasn't good enough? Not us, not our core self, not our highest self. Something
Right.
outside of us telling us that we're not good enough, which is
Yes.
why we've got to push harder, do more, do whatever. So there's a lot of things we got to do to sort of heal those wounds, especially the sufficiency wound or the inadequacy wound, right? Like that we're not enough or that we're inadequate or that we have to do more. And one way to do that is slowly, and this is something I had to teach myself over and over and over again, and I still practice, is when I set a goal, I get so excited. It feels so good to set a goal because you're using a part
Hmm.
of your brain that secretes dopamine when you set a goal. So it feels great.
Yeah.
Actually doing the work to get to the goal, one other part of your brain that you need, and that it gets hard. And that's when people start quitting. Feels good to set a goal, takes work to get there. And the work
Yeah.
part is when people start quitting.
Right.
So to help you on your way towards your goal, one of the things that I highly, highly recommend is celebrating yourself all the way there, especially if you have perfectionist tendencies, celebrating yourself
Hmm.
all the way there. So one way to celebrate yourself and is to put your right hand over your heart. And the reason why I love this is because when you put your hands anywhere on like on your shoulders, on your
Yeah.
arms, even doing like what's called havening, where you like pretend like you're putting lotion on. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see me like rubbing my hands together. When you do things like this, that touch
Uh-huh.
secretes oxytocin. So
Okay.
hand over your heart secretes oxytocin. Oxytocin is a feel-good hormone. And that hormone does two things. One, it causes intimacy for us. Like it makes us feel loved, connected. It just feels so good to our bodies. The other thing it does is it's actually good for our hearts. It causes some of the heart muscles to relax, which is really good for the heart.
Oh.
So yeah, it's cardioprotective when you release oxytocin.
Oh, wow. How
Yeah, so
interesting.
I know it's fascinating and it's so simple. So if you're listening right now, and Juliet, you and I can do this together, if you
Yeah.
put your right hand over your heart and just tell yourself, like, this is what I say every morning. Good morning, Vanessa. I love you.
Good morning, Julia. I love you. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I know. And sometimes it can feel uncomfortable, the I love you part, because maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're just
Yeah.
starting to get to know yourself. So maybe you can just
Uh-huh.
start with good morning, Vanessa. And the more and more you do it, the more you'll start realizing, like, oh, that feels uncomfortable. But then it starts feeling good and then natural. And then the more and more you can do that. So, okay, so then you secrete oxytocin. But if you're using it to celebrate yourself, I literally, at the end of my workday, so today, when I end my workday and I'm going to transition to family time, before I get up off my desk, I'll pause, one hand over my heart, and I'll just like think about everything I achieved. Maybe I got everything done on my to do list. Maybe I didn't,
Hmm.
but I definitely did my best. And so I'll
Yeah.
stop and I'll say, wow, I'm so happy I recorded that podcast with Julia. I hope I'm able to help the people that were listening. Oh, I didn't get that done, but that's okay. I did my best. And just doing that, just that part of celebration,
Hmm.
celebrating by itself secretes dopamine. So again, another feel-good hormone. And this starts to rewire your brain to celebrate the little things along the way on towards the big goals.
That is so amazing. I'm taking it in. So pardon me while I you talk about self reclamation. And I think this sounds like this is part of getting ourselves back, healing from trauma
Mhm.
and self compassion, giving ourselves grace. Is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I'm so glad you brought in that word to the space, self-reclamation. What does that mean? So reclaim. You are reclaiming who you are at your core, your authentic self, your highest self. You get to reclaim that. And not everybody, not everybody needs to go on the journey of self reclamation. The people that do, though, are the people that have been lied to, that have been told they're not good enough. They need to be this, they need to be that. They can't do this, they can't do that. Tends to be women, tends to be people of color.
Hmm.
And that journey of self reclamation, that's for me, it's like one of the most important things I do with the people that I work with is help you
Yeah.
to reclaim. Because when you reclaim yourself, what happens? You start showing up more authentic. You stop doing the things that don't serve you, that don't feel good, that don't feel right. You start leaning in towards the things that do. That's self
Yeah.
compassion, that's growth.
I could spend, I mean, the next day talking to you. You're fascinating. And the information you bring is so helpful. And you always give something that's actionable for us to practice in our own life so we can be the best version of ourselves. Can we talk briefly about your program, The Journey? I mean, it's groundbreaking. I mean, you've been featured on major networks like ABC, NBC, just to name a few. What is it? Who is it for?
Yeah. The Journey is an incredible program that I created that essentially takes everything that we talked about and then a few other things and
Mhm.
packages it in the most simplest way to help you start getting the results that you want in life. We teach you how to master your mind, how to literally rewire your brain cell to brain cell, creating new habits, creating new ways of discipline. So you start actually doing the things you say you want to do. I want to meditate. I want to exercise. I want to eat healthy. I want to have a loving relationship. So we help you rewire your brain to do that. And then we also help you rewire your emotions because it turns out it's not just your brain, it's also your nervous system, So
Yeah.
we rewire your emotions. And then we help you manage stress and the stress that's happening in everyday life. So there's like 4 parts of the program: mastering your mind, mastering your emotions, mastering stress, because stress is everywhere, and
Yes.
then mastering your time, because all of those usually show up as symptoms of like, I'm overworked, I'm busy, I'm stressed out, I'm burnt out, I don't have enough time. And so then we teach you how to master your time. And the program is incredible. It gives you all of this kind of prepackaged in a way that's super simple for you to understand and start practicing. So, like 10, 15-minute little snippets here and there so you can put it into your already busy life.
Yeah.
Plus, it gives you support. So, I work directly with all my students inside of the program, inside the journey, so that they're actually not just learning, but implementing and integrating what they're learning into their life.
It's wonderful. And I'm going to tell everyone, if you want to learn more about Dr. Vanessa Calderon and her programs, we will have all her information listed in the show notes, including links to her website and social media. Her podcast is The Empowered Brain. We'll also have links to that for you. But in the meantime, you can watch that on YouTube or listen to it anywhere you get your podcasts. I want to say, not just thank you for being here, but thank you for what you do. You always give such wonderful words of encouragement. I think my favorite is our success is inevitable if we keep going.
Mm, 1,000,000%. I believe that 100%. I was raised by a mom who I never once heard her say impossible. I never once heard her say that word. And so I just always thought everything was possible. And so of course I believe like, okay, well, if it's possible, all I got to do is figure it out.
Right?
How can I figure it out? And so for those of you that are listening, I'm so happy you brought that in, Julia. For those of you that are listening, know whatever life you want to create, it's 100% possible for you. You just have to keep going. The one thing that gets in the way is when we stop believing that it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's so life affirming. Our success is inevitable. It's going to happen if we just keep doing what we're doing. And even if we fall down, get back up. Even if we quit, recommit, like you talk about. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Like I said, I could spend days listening to you. You're incredible. So thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate what you do. Thank you for joining me today on Moving Mattresses and 3-inch Heels. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest tips for living your best life. Until next time, stay fabulous, and remember, your wellness journey matters. Self-care is a necessity and it does not require an apology. I'll see you soon.